What if time itself is not the beginning? What if the great clock of the cosmos did not start with the Big Bang, but only reset? Imagine for a moment that everything you have ever known, the rise of stars, the birth of galaxies, the rhythm of days and nights, the fleeting pulse of your own heartbeat, was only the latest act in a drama that has no first scene. If time had a curtain pulled open to reveal creation, who or what was standing behind it, waiting for the play to begin? We are taught that the Big Bang was the origin of all things, but origins are deceptive. They are lines drawn by limited minds trying to cage the infinite. What if the Big Bang was not the birth of the universe, but the echo of something collapsing, folding into itself, preparing the stage for what would come after? What if there was a civilization before time began, a race so ancient, so advanced, that their world could not even be measured in years because years did not yet exist? They were not bound by clocks or the slow dripping of moments. They shaped reality not as builders carve stone, but as dreamers sculpt the fabric of imagination. If such beings existed, what traces would they leave? Would they leave monuments, impossible to erode, standing silent across eternity? Would they carve their secrets into the constants of physics, embedding them in the numbers that govern the stars? Or would they hide in our myths, whispering their presence through stories so old that we call them fables, never realizing they are memories? You and I live in a universe that feels permanent, solid, endless. But permanence is an illusion, and what we call solid is mostly empty space. What if that emptiness is not emptiness at all, but the canvas where another hand once painted reality? The haunting truth is that science itself offers us clues. Quantum fluctuations, tiny ripples in nothingness, give birth to particles out of emptiness. But why does this happen? Why is there something rather than nothing? Physicists tell us about the delicate balance of forces, the fine-tuning of constants that, if changed by even a fraction, would unravel stars and dissolve galaxies before they could ever form. To most, this is a miracle without explanation. But what if it is not a miracle? What if it is architecture? What if someone tuned the strings of the universe long before there was an ear to hear the music? Every civilization we know leaves echoes. Ancient cities leave ruins. Forgotten empires leave monuments. Extinct species leave fossils. But a civilization before time, its ruins would not lie beneath the soil. Its fossils would not rest in stone. Its echoes would vibrate in the mathematics of reality itself. The cosmic microwave background, the faint afterglow of creation, might not only be the ashes of a fireball, but the static of an old transmission. The strange uniformity of its signal might be the last blurred fingerprint of a design so vast that we mistake it for chaos. And if this is true, then every question we ask about beginnings becomes something else. Did they create us? Did they fail? And are we living in the ruins of their attempt? Or are we the continuation, the children of their design, walking unknowing in their shadow? The more we ask, the more terrifying it becomes. Because if time was built, then it can be broken. If reality was sculpted, it can be reshaped. And if there was a civilization before time, they may not be gone. They may simply be waiting, outside the frame of moments, watching. Consider the myths of humanity, the cosmic egg of Hindu lore, the primordial waters of the Babylonians, the silent void before Genesis. All speak of a time before time, of a presence before the first dawn. Are these just stories, or are they distorted memories of something humanity once glimpsed but could not understand? Myths survive because they resonate with something deeper than reason. They persist because they are not inventions, but translations. Translations of truths too vast to put into language. What if all civilizations carry, hidden in their oldest tales, the faint memory of the ones who came before the first tick of the cosmic clock? Think of the pyramids of Giza, aligned with the stars. Think of the Sumerian kings, who ruled for thousands of years according to their lists, stretching human history beyond plausibility. Think of the uncanny precision of megalithic stones, aligned with solstices, whispering of a knowledge too advanced for the hands that built them. We treat these as curiosities, puzzles to be solved with clever theories. But what if they are echoes? What if those who shaped them were not honoring gods of the sky, but remembering the architects who shaped the sky itself? Science gives us particles, equations, the measurable. Philosophy gives us questions. Myth gives us stories. But when all three point toward the same abyss, we are forced to look. What if time has a parent? What if reality has a sculptor? And what if that sculptor is still present, hidden in plain sight? Perhaps in the very laws we study, the constants we recite, the myths we dismiss as fantasy, their voice is still whispering. A voice that says, "We were here before you, we will be here after you, and everything you call eternal is only a page in a book you did not write." Imagine them, a civilization not of stone, not of flesh, but of will. They shaped light as a painter shapes color. They bent space as a potter bends clay. They did not travel through the cosmos. They built the cosmos. To them, galaxies were bricks, stars were tools, and time itself was a resource, to be stretched, folded, erased, or begun anew. To us, this is incomprehensible, but to them, it was the ordinary as you breathing, as ordinary as you closing your eyes. And just as you do not remember every breath, perhaps they do not remember every universe. Perhaps we are one of many, an experiment, a story written and forgotten, until one day it stirs again in memory. But if they are forgotten, who remembers them? Maybe we do. Maybe their fingerprints linger in our myths, in our physics, in our imaginations. Why do we dream of gods, of creators, of beings beyond time? Why do we ache to reach the stars, to touch the infinite, to break the cage of mortality? Could it be instinct? Or could it be inheritance? Perhaps the longing itself is the memory. Perhaps the yearning to transcend is their whisper in our blood. Close your eyes and imagine standing before the void. No stars, no galaxies, no matter. Only silence. And then, something. A hand. Not physical but conceptual, reaching into the nothing and stirring it. A vibration, a resonance, a thought. And from that thought, time blooms. Light explodes. The void fractures into galaxies, suns, and worlds. And billions of years later, you are here, listening, wondering. And perhaps that was always the point, that you would wonder, that you would feel the shiver of recognition and ask, who was before us? We are not supposed to ask these questions. Science tells us that speculation without evidence is folly. Religion tells us that creation is divine mystery. Philosophy tells us that truth may be unknowable, but the questions persist. They persist because the human heart knows what the human mind fears, that reality is not random, not meaningless, not inevitable. It is intentional. And intention means intelligence. Intelligence means someone. Someone was here before us. And so, the first segment of this journey begins not with an answer, but with a haunting possibility. That the greatest mystery of existence is not that the universe began, but that it began again. That everything we know is built upon the ashes of a reality we will never see. That our myths, our physics, our very selves are echoes of a civilization so old, so powerful, that time itself was their invention. And if they existed once, they could exist still, waiting in the silence, watching us stumble through the seconds, unaware of the ones who carved them. What if creation did not begin with silence, but with memory? Imagine a time before time, where nothing existed to measure distance or change, and yet something persisted, a residue, an echo, a vibration that refused to vanish. Could it be that the first breath of our universe was not original, but inherited? That when the cosmos flared into being, it was carrying within it the fingerprints of what came before? Science calls them fluctuations, tiny ripples in the quantum void, meaningless jitter in the fabric of nothingness. But why do they exist at all? Why does emptiness tremble? Why should the void hum with possibility instead of simply lying still? The equations tell us they must, and so they do. But equations are not explanations. They are only the bones of something we cannot flesh out. What if those ripples are not accidents, but reminders, remnants of an earlier order, surviving the fire of the reset, bleeding through into the reality we call our own? Across the world, across cultures separated by oceans and centuries, humanity has always whispered of beginnings. The cosmic egg of Hindu philosophy, golden and eternal, breaking open to reveal existence. The primordial waters of Mesopotamia, endless and dark, from which the gods carved creation. The formless void of Genesis, over which a spirit moved before light was born. None of these stories are the same, and yet all of them carry the same haunting note. Before there was order, there was something. Not nothing, but something unspeakable. Could it be that these myths are the mind's attempt to remember? Not inventions, not fantasies, but fragments of a truth so old it survived only as metaphor? Myth is a strange kind of memory. We dismiss it because it lacks proof. But proof is only evidence that survives long enough for us to measure. If a civilization existed before time, how could proof survive? Stones erode, stars burn out, records vanish in the fires of collapse. But story lingers. Story can cross the fire, leap the centuries, disguise itself in song and ritual until no one recalls where it came from. Perhaps every culture clung to its fragment of memory, carrying the echo of something vast, something real, something older than creation itself. Even physics, in its own cold, clinical way, speaks of echoes. The cosmic microwave background is not just light, it is residue. A photograph burned into the universe, still glowing faintly billions of years later. We look at it and see heat, radiation, a dying whisper of a birth. But what if it is more than a whisper? What if it is a scar? The texture of that background is too smooth, too eerily uniform, except for tiny anomalies that no one can quite explain. Some call them accidents, others call them noise. But what if they are fingerprints? Smudges left behind by the hands that carve time into motion. In the quantum world, there are symmetries, elegant balances that should exist, but don't. For every particle, there should be its twin. And yet the universe favors matter over antimatter. Why? Why this imbalance, this broken perfection? Some say it is random. Others say it is necessity. But randomness is only a word we use when meaning escapes us. What if this asymmetry is not a mistake, but a message, a deliberate flaw, a mark etched into creation, saying, "Remember us. We were here before you. We chose the imbalance so you could live." Think of sound. When a song ends, the final note lingers. The air continues to vibrate even after the voice is gone. The universe, too, vibrates. Its vibrations are not heard, but felt, measured in frequencies and forces. Could these be the last chords of a melody played before our universe began? Are we walking in a hall where the music has ended, but the resonance still shivers through the walls? And if so, what kind of instrument must it have been, and who were the players? Even in our bodies, echoes persist. DNA carries codes billions of years old, inherited through unbroken chains of life. The cells in your hand contain instructions older than mountains, older than oceans. They carry the memory of survival, of adaptation, of resilience. If such persistence exists in something as fragile as biology, why not in the structure of reality itself? Why should we not expect the universe to inherit memory from what came before? Perhaps the constants of physics are not constants at all, but heirlooms, gifts passed down from one creation to the next. And if the universe inherited memory, then so did we. Why do humans dream of eternity? Why do we look to the stars with longing, imagining gods and creators and worlds beyond the visible? Why do we tell stories of golden ages lost, of worlds destroyed and rebuilt, of cycles and returns? Could it be that we ache not for what we imagine, but for what we remember? Could our myths be less about invention and more about recognition, the faint recall of something our ancestors knew, carried not in books or words, but in the marrow of existence itself? Perhaps that is why children imagine so freely. Perhaps that is why dreams feel older than waking. Perhaps in those fragile states, we brush against what lies beneath, what came before. The mind, unbound from clocks and calendars, drifts into a space where echoes are louder, where memory of the pre-time civilization sings faintly in the background, like a forgotten lullaby. And when we wake, we call it imagination. But what if it is not imagination at all? What if it is remembrance? The frightening possibility is this: if echoes exist, then their source exists. No echo is without origin. No memory is without event. If we feel the resonance, if we see the anomalies, if we dream the myths, then somewhere, somehow, the civilization before time was real. They are not fantasy. They are not metaphor. They are history. History written in the language of vibration, light, and story. And if history survives, then perhaps so do they. So we are left with a question that is heavier than wonder and sharper than fear. If they existed before time, where are they now? Did they vanish in the collapse that gave birth to our universe? Or did they step outside, beyond the reach of minutes and hours, waiting for us to notice, waiting for us to recognize their echo and ask the only question that matters: who was before us? And perhaps they are waiting still, in the resonance of physics, in the rhythm of myth, in the dreams of humanity. They wait, patient, knowing that someday a species will ask not when the universe began, but what was carried into it. And in that moment of recognition, the echo will become a voice, and the voice will say, "You have remembered. What if creation did not begin with silence, but with memory? Imagine a time before time, where nothing existed to measure distance or change, and yet something persisted, a residue, an echo, a vibration that refused to vanish. Could it be that the first breath of our universe was not original, but inherited? That when the cosmos flared into being, it was carrying within it the fingerprints of what came before? Science calls them fluctuations, tiny ripples in the quantum void, meaningless jitter in the fabric of nothingness. But why do they exist at all? Why does emptiness tremble? Why should the void hum with possibility instead of simply lying still? The equations tell us they must, and so they do. But equations are not explanations. They are only the bones of something we cannot flesh out. What if those ripples are not accidents, but reminders, remnants of an earlier order, surviving the fire of the reset, bleeding through into the reality we call our own? Across the world, across cultures separated by oceans and centuries, humanity has always whispered of beginnings. The cosmic egg of Hindu philosophy, golden and eternal, breaking open to reveal existence. The primordial waters of Mesopotamia, endless and dark, from which the gods carved creation. The formless void of Genesis, over which a spirit moved before light was born. None of these stories are the same, and yet all of them carry the same haunting note. Before there was order, there was something. Not nothing, but something unspeakable. Could it be that these myths are the mind's attempt to remember? Not inventions, not fantasies, but fragments of a truth so old it survived only as metaphor. Myth is a strange kind of memory. We dismiss it because it lacks proof. But proof is only evidence that survives long enough for us to measure. If a civilization existed before time, how could proof survive? Stones erode, stars burn out, records vanish in the fires of collapse. But story lingers. Story can cross the fire, leap the centuries, disguise itself in song and ritual until no one recalls where it came from. Perhaps every culture clung to its fragment of memory, carrying the echo of something vast, something real, something older than creation itself. Even physics, in its own cold, clinical way, speaks of echoes. The cosmic microwave background is not just light, it is residue. A photograph burned into the universe, still glowing faintly billions of years later. We look at it and see heat, radiation, a dying whisper of a birth. But what if it is more than a whisper? What if it is a scar? The texture of that background is too smooth, too eerily uniform, except for tiny anomalies that no one can quite explain. Some call them accidents, others call them noise. But what if they are fingerprints, smudges left behind by the hands that carve time into motion? In the quantum world, there are symmetries, elegant balances that should exist, but don't. For every particle, there should be its twin, and yet the universe favors matter over antimatter. Why? Why this imbalance, this broken perfection? Some say it is random. Others say it is necessity. But randomness is only a word we use when meaning escapes us. What if this asymmetry is not a mistake, but a message, a deliberate flaw, a mark etched into creation, saying, "Remember us. We were here before you. We chose the imbalance so you could live." Think of sound. When a song ends, the final note lingers. The air continues to vibrate even after the voice is gone. The universe, too, vibrates. Its vibrations are not heard but felt, measured in frequencies and forces. Could these be the last chords of a melody played before our universe began? Are we walking in a hall where the music has ended, but the resonance still shivers through the walls? And if so, what kind of instrument must it have been, and who were the players? Even in our bodies, echoes persist. DNA carries codes billions of years old, inherited through unbroken chains of life. The cells in your hand contain instructions older than mountains, older than oceans. They carry the memory of survival, of adaptation, of resilience. If such persistence exists in something as fragile as biology, Why not in the structure of reality itself? Why should we not expect the universe to inherit memory from what came before? Perhaps the constants of physics are not constants at all, but heirlooms, gifts passed down from one creation to the next. And if the universe inherited memory, then so did we. Why do humans dream of eternity? Why do we look to the stars with longing, imagining gods and creators and worlds beyond the visible? Why do we tell stories of golden ages lost, of worlds destroyed and rebuilt, of cycles and returns? Could it be that we ache not for what we imagine, but for what we remember? Could our myths be less about invention and more about recognition? The faint recall of something our ancestors knew, carried not in books or words, but in the marrow of existence itself. Perhaps that is why children imagine so freely. Perhaps that is why dreams feel older than waking. Perhaps in those fragile states, we brush against what lies beneath, what came before. The mind, unbound from clocks and calendars, drifts into a space where echoes are louder, where memory of the pre-time civilization sings faintly in the background, like a forgotten lullaby. And when we wake, we call it imagination. But what if it is not imagination at all? What if it is remembrance? The frightening possibility is this: if echoes exist, then their source exists. No echo is without origin. No memory is without event. If we feel the resonance, if we see the anomalies, if we dream the myths, then somewhere, somehow, the civilization before time was real. They are not fantasy. They are not metaphor. They are history. History written in the language of vibration, light, and story. And if history survives, then perhaps so do they. So, we are left with a question that is heavier than wonder and sharper than fear. If they existed before time, where are they now? Did they vanish in the collapse that gave birth to our universe? Or did they step outside, beyond the reach of minutes and hours, waiting for us to notice? Waiting for us to recognize their echo and ask the only question that matters: who was before us? And perhaps they are waiting still, in the resonance of physics, in the rhythm of myth, in the dreams of humanity. They wait, patient, knowing that someday a species will ask not when the universe began, but what was carried into it. And in that moment of recognition, the echo will become a voice, and the voice will say, "You have remembered." What does it mean to build a universe? To us, creation is an act of hands and labor, of stone cut into walls and wood shaped into roofs. But to a civilization that existed before time, creation could not be so small. They did not work in clay or metal. Their medium was the void itself. Their tools were not chisels or fire, but principles, the raw bones of reality, gravity, light, energy, time. Imagine not shaping bricks, but shaping stars. Imagine not stacking stones, but aligning galaxies. Imagine not building houses, but building the stage on which all existence plays its endless drama. Could there have been architects of the first reality? Minds vast enough to think not in words, but in dimensions. Intelligences so far beyond us that the laws of physics were not laws to them, but materials, pliable, responsive, obedient. To us, the universe feels permanent, inevitable. But permanence is the illusion of the small. To them, it may have been as malleable as wet clay, something to be bent, molded, erased, and rewritten. What if the Big Bang itself was not an accident, not a chance explosion, but a decision? A deliberate ignition, the lighting of a flame by hands we cannot comprehend. Science tells us the constants of physics are finely tuned. If gravity were slightly stronger, stars would collapse too quickly for life to form. If it were weaker, galaxies would never gather. If the charge of the electron or the strength of the strong nuclear force were altered even a fraction, reality as we know it would unravel. To us, this is coincidence or mystery. To them, perhaps it was calculation. Perhaps each constant was chosen, adjusted, tested, until the design produced something stable, something beautiful, something alive. Perhaps our universe is not a random outcome, but an artifact of design, a cathedral built not of stone, but of space-time itself. Think of the pyramids of Giza, aligned with Orion. Think of Stonehenge, capturing the solstice. Think of ancient temples across the world, all obsessed with the sky, all repeating patterns of stars in their walls and gates. Were these mere coincidences of culture, or were they desperate attempts to mirror something greater, something remembered dimly by early humanity? the knowledge that reality itself had once been engineered with the same precision, the same obsessive alignment, the same haunting order. We build monuments to echo what we cannot forget, even when we no longer understand what it is we are remembering. Perhaps these ancient architects were not gods in the sense we imagine, not beings of flesh and thunder, but designers, engineers, dreamers of unimaginable scale. They may not have looked like us, or even like life as we define it, and they may not have had bodies at all. They may have existed as pure intention, pure form, pure intelligence sculpting possibility into being. To them, time may not have been a river, but a tool, something they could fold, compress, or extend. They may have built not one reality, but many, experimenting with designs, letting them collapse, starting again until one of them sang, until one of them produced the harmony we live in now. But if they were architects, what was their goal? Why build? Why ignite universes like sparks, only to watch them burn or fail? Was it curiosity? Was it necessity? Was it something like our own desire to create art, to tell stories, to leave behind echoes of ourselves? Or was it darker? Was it survival? Did they build not out of wonder, but out of fear? Fear of ending, fear of silence, fear of being forgotten in the abyss beyond time? Did they build universes as one might build shelters, desperately, endlessly, against a void that devours all? We may never know their motives, but we can feel their presence in every equation that whispers perfection, in every law that feels too precise to be chance, in the balance of forces, in the elegance of mathematics, in the very fact that the universe is comprehensible to minds like ours. Why should reality make sense? Why should mathematics, a language born in the human brain, map perfectly onto the workings of stars and atoms? Unless the universe was built with a logic, with an architecture that could be read, like blueprints written in numbers. Perhaps the architects left the key in plain sight, knowing that if any beings ever rose to awareness, they would find it. And in finding it, they would remember. And what of myth? Across cultures, there are always stories of makers, the demiurges, the titans, the gods who shaped the world from chaos. In Plato's writings, the demiurge is not a god of worship, but a craftsman, an artisan imposing order on disorder. In the Vedic hymns, creation is not random, but sung into existence, patterned with intent. In the Sumerian epics, the gods labor, plan, argue, and build. Always there are builders. Always there are shapers. Why does the human imagination insist on creators, if not because somewhere deep in the marrow of existence, we remember them? And if there were architects, could they still be present? Perhaps they retreated beyond the walls of time, content to let their creation unfold. Perhaps they are gone, extinguished by the same laws they once commanded. Or perhaps they are hidden, watching, intervening only subtly, leaving anomalies as signatures, dark matter, unseen but everywhere, holding galaxies together. Dark energy, forcing expansion into acceleration. We name them, we measure them, but we do not understand them. What if they are the tools of the architects, still humming, still working, long after the builders themselves have vanished? Imagine it, a civilization so old that universes are their monuments, so advanced that the birth of galaxies is no more to them than the raising of walls, so immense that we, with our fleeting lives and fragile bodies, are like sparks on the edge of their design. And yet, we feel them. We sense their presence in the silence between stars, in the equations that bind atoms, in the myths that haunt our oldest stories. We are walking through their cathedral, blind to the architecture, yet awed by the beauty. And perhaps this is the greatest gift, or the greatest curse, that in our bones, in our questions, in our relentless drive to seek, we are carrying their echo. The architects of the first reality may be gone, but they live in us. Every question we ask, every star we chart, every equation we solve is a fragment of their memory awakening in us. We build because they built. We dream because they dreamed. We seek because they sought. And one day, perhaps, we will become as they were and shape reality itself, not because we are gods, but because we are their children. If this is true, then the story of existence is not the story of chance, but of inheritance. We are not the first. We will not be the last. We are one line in a design so vast that even time itself cannot hold it. And as we walk deeper into the labyrinth of our own questions, we must ask, If they were the architects of the first reality, then what did they leave behind for us to find? What doors did they build into the structure of the cosmos, waiting for us to open? And when we open them, will we find them waiting on the other side? The universe whispers in numbers. To most, they are lifeless symbols, cold equations scribbled on chalkboards. But to those who listen, they are more than numbers. They are patterns, rhythms, signatures. They are the fingerprints of something greater. For all the beauty of the stars, for all the vastness of the galaxies, the deepest mysteries of existence are written not in light, but in mathematics. And mathematics, though silent, tells a story of precision so delicate, so unlikely, that one cannot help but wonder, was it left here on purpose? Consider the constants. Gravity, weak yet binding, stretching across infinite distances. The charge of the electron, identical in every particle that has ever existed. The speed of light, the universal limit that nothing outruns. They do not waver, they do not falter, they are the same everywhere, in every age. And yet, their values are strange, too perfect, too tuned. If they had been different by the smallest fraction, the universe would not exist. Stars would never ignite, planets would never form, life would never breathe. Why, then, are they what they are? Are we to believe it is coincidence, or is it design? Physicists have wrestled with this for decades, calling it fine-tuning. Some say it proves the multiverse, infinite realities, each with different constants, ours simply happening to allow life. But what if the answer is more unsettling? What if the constants are not accidents, but artifacts? What if they are not random values, but chosen ones, deliberately set by minds that treated physics as clay, shaping it until it held? In this view, every equation is not a discovery, but a memory. We are not decoding chance, we are reading instructions. Look closer, and the anomalies deepen. The cosmic microwave background, the afterglow of the Big Bang, should be random, chaotic, scattered. And yet, it is eerily smooth, almost uniform, as though spread by an unseen hand. The tiny fluctuations it does contain, ripples in the afterglow, are not random noise but patterns. Patterns that determine where galaxies would form, how matter would gather, how reality itself would evolve. To scientists, they are mysteries. To us, perhaps, they are brushstrokes. Brushstrokes left by architects who shaped the void, laying down the first contours of the cosmos as a painter sketches the outline of a masterpiece. Dark matter is another ghost. Invisible, undetectable, yet undeniable, it outweighs all visible matter 5-1. Without it, galaxies would fly apart, stars would scatter into emptiness, the universe would be dust and silence. What is it? We do not know. We name it only because we cannot see it, but we see its effect, binding galaxies like mortar between stones. Some say it is undiscovered particles. Others say it is new physics. But what if it is neither? What if it is scaffolding? Invisible supports left in place to hold the structure steady. What if dark matter is not matter at all, but the residue of construction, the framework of a design so ancient we mistake it for mystery? Then there is dark energy, even stranger, a force not of binding, but of tearing, pushing galaxies apart, accelerating the expansion of the universe as though the cosmos itself were fleeing something. Why should the universe expand faster and faster, instead of slowing as gravity pulls it back? Some imagine it is a property of space itself. Others admit we do not know. But what if it is not natural at all? What if it is an engine still running, a tool left humming by the builders of reality long after they were gone? The architects may have set the expansion to ensure stability, to prevent collapse, to keep the universe breathing. Or perhaps it was their signal, their reminder, their mark. We were here. Everywhere we look, we see equations, the orbit of planets, the fusion of stars, the dance of electrons, all precise, all unyielding, all obedient to rules. But rules are not inevitable. Rules are chosen. A game has rules because someone made them. A machine has rules because someone designed it. So why does the universe have rules at all? Why should light move at one speed and not another? Why should gravity exist instead of nothing at all? We accept these laws because we must, but in their very existence, they whisper intention. Rules without a rule maker are no rules at all. They are miracles without meaning. Think of music. A symphony is beautiful not because sound exists, but because sound is arranged. Notes follow one another in a pattern that produces harmony, tension, release. The universe, too, hums with harmony. The orbits of planets echo ratios of resonance. The spiral arms of galaxies trace logarithmic curves. The shells of atoms echo mathematical symmetries. Why should matter sing in mathematics unless it was tuned to do so? Unless the architects wrote a song into the cosmos, a song we are only beginning to hear. Even randomness betrays order. Quantum mechanics tells us particles flicker in and out of being, probabilities collapsing into certainties when observed. But why should observation matter? Why should the act of looking alter reality? It is as if the universe is built to respond to awareness, as if consciousness is not an accident, but a feature of the design. What kind of architects would build a reality that awakens when watched? Did they intend for us to rise, to look, to notice? Or are we only instruments, playing the music they composed, unaware of the composer? There are numbers, too, that haunt us. Ratios and constants that appear everywhere, inexplicably. Pi, the endless circle. Phi, the golden ratio, echoed in galaxies and flowers alike. Euler's number, the base of growth and decay. These numbers are not inventions. They are discoveries, existing whether or not we name them. But why do they matter? Why should spirals echo phi? Why should growth follow E? Why should circles hide pi? Unless they were written into reality as signatures, left there by the ones who built the frame, it is tempting to dismiss all of this as coincidence, as overreach, as human minds desperate to see meaning in chaos. But meaning itself is suspicious. Why should minds like ours exist at all, able to ask, able to wonder, able to dream of architects before time? Evolution explains survival, but not longing. Physics explains matter, but not meaning. Yet here we are, fragile creatures of flesh, staring into the abyss of equations and feeling not nothing, but awe. Awe itself may be the echo, the recognition that what we see is not chance, but craft. And so, we must ask, if these laws are fingerprints, what do they tell us of the builders? Were they benevolent, tuning reality for life to bloom? Or indifferent, setting parameters for reasons we cannot fathom? Or perhaps playful, weaving beauty into existence as artists do, not for purpose, but for joy? The terrifying truth is that we cannot know. We can only read the equations, marvel at the precision, and wonder whose hand wrote them. Perhaps the architects are gone, dissolved in the collapse that reset time. Or perhaps they linger, not in bodies or voices, but in the very fabric of physics, alive in every constant, every symmetry, every anomaly. To study physics may not only be to study nature, it may be to read scripture, to trace the words of an intelligence so old it predates time, so vast it used the universe itself as parchment. And in doing so, we are not only scientists, we are archaeologists, sifting through equations like ruins, hoping one day to find the mark that says, here we were. What if the oldest stories were not inventions, but messages? What if the tales told around ancient fires, the hymns carved into stone, the chants whispered in temples, were not the fantasies of primitive minds, but fragments of memory? Memory of something so vast, so real, that language could not contain it? We call them myths, but myths are never born from nothing. Myths are echoes, translated through the fragile filter of human imagination. And sometimes, echoes preserve more truth than history itself. Across the world, cultures that never touched one another speak of the same things. Floods that erase the world, towers that reach the heavens, gods who descended from the sky, cycles of destruction and rebirth, golden ages lost in shadow. How could they all invent the same stories, separated by oceans and centuries? Coincidence is too weak an answer. There is something deeper here, something that stirs uneasily beneath the surface. Could it be that these are not stories at all, but codes, messages left behind, distorted by time, yet carrying fragments of a truth too dangerous, too immense, to vanish? Consider Atlantis. Plato tells us of a great civilization, wise and powerful, that fell in a single night, swallowed by the sea. For centuries it has been dismissed as allegory, a philosopher's parable of pride and collapse. But what if it is older than Plato? What if he was only repeating what had already been repeated countless times before him? A memory of a world erased not by flood or fire, but by time itself. A civilization not lost in the ocean, but lost in the reset of reality. Atlantis, then, would not be a city, but a metaphor for something greater. The memory of the world that existed before our world began. The Sumerians wrote of kings who ruled for thousands of years before the flood. Their reigns impossibly long, stretching beyond the capacity of flesh. Scholars dismiss this as exaggeration, myth-making to glorify ancestors. But what if it is literal? What if those rulers were not men, but remnants, beings who carried with them fragments of the old civilization, surviving into the new timeline? To the Sumerians, they were kings. To us, they might be fossils of memory, echoes of the ones who shaped reality before time was born. In Hindu cosmology, time is cyclical. Yugas stretch into millions of years, ages repeating in endless patterns of creation and destruction. Why would humanity invent such vast spans of time when daily survival was measured in hours? Why imagine billions of years, if not because somewhere, someone remembered? The Vedic texts whisper of beings older than the stars, of gods who sang the universe into existence, of knowledge so complete that it could bend the laws of nature. Could these hymns be the distorted recollections of a truth that before our universe, another intelligence sculpted the frame of reality? Even the Bible begins with a void, a formless darkness, and a spirit moving over waters before light was spoken. The Greeks told of chaos, the yawning abyss before Gaia and Uranus, before order. The Egyptians spoke of none, the endless flood from which the first mound arose. Again and again, cultures speak of a before creation, a before time. Could it be that these are not cultural inventions, but fragments of a universal memory? That in our myths, humanity has been carrying codes of a civilization that preceded us, passing them down like seeds in the dark, waiting for us to understand. Perhaps that is why so many myths are forbidden, stories hidden, locked away, declared dangerous. Knowledge restricted to priests, guarded in temples, whispered only to initiates. What were they hiding? Or rather, what were they protecting? Perhaps they feared what would happen if ordinary minds glimpsed the truth, that our world is not the first, that our reality is not original, that we are the inheritors of a story too large to contain. To guard such knowledge was not superstition, but survival. For to know you are living in a designed reality is to risk despair, madness, collapse. Better to bury the truth in story. Better to call it myth. But myths are not silent. They speak if we listen. Think of Prometheus stealing fire from the gods. Was it fire or was it knowledge? Knowledge that burned the mind like flame. Think of the serpent in Eden, offering not destruction, but awareness. Think of the Tower of Babel, humanity building upward, only to be struck down for daring to reach too far. Again and again the same warning. Knowledge is dangerous, forbidden, because it carries echoes of the old world. And yet, humanity cannot help but seek it. We climb towers, we steal fire, we eat the fruit. Because in our bones, we remember. Because in our souls, we know the codes are meant to be unlocked. Even numbers may be codes. Sacred geometry, the golden ratio, the endless circle of pi. These are not human inventions. They are discoveries recurring everywhere, in shells and galaxies and temples built millennia apart. Why should a spiral echo the same number in a sunflower and in the arms of the Milky Way? Unless it is not coincidence, but signature. Unless the architects of the pre-time civilization wove their code into the very shape of reality, so that no matter what survived the reset, their message would endure, and we, unknowingly, carved their numbers into our temples, our art, our myths, never realizing we are writing the memory of another world. Symbols too endure. The eye, the serpent, the wheel, the cross. Across cultures they repeat, the same shapes appearing in places that should never have touched. Some say this is Jung's collective unconscious, archetypes wired into the human mind. But what if it is not psychology at all? What if it is archaeology? What if these symbols are the relics of the pre-time civilization, carried through resets like seeds through fire, sprouting again and again in new soil? The eye watching, the serpent coiling, the wheel turning, the cross intersecting. Each one a fragment of a language we no longer speak, a code we no longer understand, but which still burns in our dreams. And perhaps dreams themselves are the greatest code. For in dreams, time loses meaning. Seconds stretch into hours, hours collapse into flashes. Symbols flood the mind without logic, yet carry weight, resonance, significance. Could it be that dreaming is the mind touching memory, brushing against the echoes of what came before? In sleep, we forget the rules. And perhaps in forgetting them, we recall something older. Perhaps the forbidden knowledge survives not in books or stones, but in the silence of sleep, whispered to us by the part of existence that never forgot. So we stand among myths, surrounded by codes, unaware that they are not inventions, but inheritances. We chant them in temples, carve them into monuments, teach them to children as stories, never realizing they are the memory of a civilization that existed before time itself. And if that is true, then the greatest question is not whether the myths are real, but why they were left. Were they warnings? Were they instructions? Were they the architect's way of guiding us, ensuring we would one day remember? Or were they traps, fragments of knowledge that could unravel us if we understood too much, too soon? Perhaps both. For knowledge is never innocent. Knowledge shapes, bends, burns. The myths tell us this again and again. Fire stolen, fruit eaten, towers built, floods unleashed. Each time, humanity reaches. Each time, the price is paid. And yet, each time, something endures. A fragment, a symbol, a code. Because perhaps the architects knew that one day the children of their design would awaken. One day, we would look at myth, not as fantasy, but as message. And when that day comes, the code will open. The forbidden will be revealed, and we will see not only who we are, but who was here before us. The earth is littered with puzzles, stones that do not belong where they stand, monuments that defy the tools of their time, alignments so precise they mock the idea of coincidence. We call them wonders, but wonder is only a veil we pull over ignorance, for beneath the awe lies unease. These structures should not exist, and yet they do. Silent, immovable, haunting. They are more than architecture. They are memories carved into stone. Consider the pyramids of Giza. Vast, geometric, aligned with Orion's belt to an accuracy that even modern engineers marvel at. We are told they were tombs, but tombs need not align with the heavens. Tombs need not encode the dimensions of the earth with uncanny precision. Tombs need not outlast empires, unyielding to time and sand. What if they are not tombs at all? What if they are messages? Blueprints etched into the skin of the planet, whispering of a knowledge not born of Bronze Age hands, but inherited from something older, something that remembered the architects of the first reality? Look to Stonehenge, its massive stones lifted and placed by hands that should not have been capable, not scattered, not random, but aligned, marking solstices, tracking the heavens, binding earth to sky. To us, it is a mystery. To them, perhaps it was memory. Perhaps it was an attempt to replicate what was once known, the dance of stars, or the precision of cycles, the architecture of time itself. Perhaps the builders were not inventors, but inheritors, reconstructing fragments of a code passed down through myth and dream. Travel to Göbekli Tepe, 12,000 years old, older than writing, older than farming, older than any civilization we know. Pillars carved with animals, circles aligned with celestial patterns. Who built it, and why? Why would hunter-gatherers create temples before cities? Why would they move stone before sowing grain? Unless the stones were not for worship, but for remembrance. Unless they were not praying to gods, but recalling a story older than themselves. A story of a world before time, a story too vast to vanish. So it was carved into stone and buried beneath the earth, waiting for us to uncover it. And then there are the Nazca lines, vast shapes etched into the desert, visible only from the sky. A hummingbird, a spider, a monkey, drawn on a scale no foot could comprehend. Why draw for the heavens, unless the heavens themselves were part of the code? Unless the act of shaping earth into symbols was a way of reaching outward, a way of saying, we remember. We remember what was lost. We remember the ones who built before time. We may not understand, but we cannot forget. Across the oceans, the Moai of Easter Island stare silently toward the horizon. Enormous heads, buried bodies, watching, waiting. Their gaze is not random. They look outward, as though searching for something, as though guarding something. Were they guardians of memory? Were they meant to watch the sea for the return of those who had gone before? Or were they simply the fragments of a dream, half remembered by a people who felt the echo but could not name it. In Peru, Sacsayhuaman stretches across the hills with stones so massive, so perfectly fitted, that no blade of grass can slip between them. They are cut with precision we struggle to replicate, their surfaces smooth as though molded, their angles interlocking like puzzle pieces in a design too perfect to be chance. Who shaped them? Why with such precision? Why with such permanence? Perhaps because they were not walls of defense, but walls of memory. Perhaps they were built to endure, to survive resets, to carry through the ages the signature of something beyond comprehension. The pattern repeats everywhere, monuments aligned with stars, temples echoing cosmic cycles, symbols etched into stone, into earth, into sky. Why the obsession with alignment? Why the need to bind architecture to astronomy, to encode heavens into stone? Unless they were not worshiping the sky, but remembering its design. Unless they were not honoring gods, but preserving codes. For if you suspect your world is not the first, if you suspect time has reset before, then what do? You build, you carve, you etch memory into the hardest material you can find, so that when the reset comes, something will remain. Perhaps this is why the myths and the structures mirror one another. The myths speak of floods, fires, destructions, and rebirths. The structures whisper the same in stone. Together they form a language. Myth is story. Monument is code, both fragments of a memory too large for any single age to hold. And in their persistence, we feel the presence of the pre-time civilization, not directly, not visibly, but as shadow, as resonance, as echo. The haunting truth is this: the structures should not exist, but they do. They are not mistakes of history. They are not curiosities of archaeology. They are the fossils of knowledge, the bones of memory. They remind us that humanity has always known more than it should, that somewhere, buried deep, we carry the fragments of a civilization that carved reality itself. And though the architects are gone, though time has erased their world, their signature remains in the stones, watching, waiting, whispering, remember. What if the universe you see is not the only one? What if it is not even the first? Imagine creation not as a singular event, but as a workshop, where countless experiments were built, tested, and abandoned. Draft after draft of reality, some collapsing in silence, some unraveling in chaos, some flickering briefly before vanishing into the void. And then, one held. One survived. The one we call our universe. But if this is true, then what are we? Are we the perfected result of endless attempts, or the accidental survivor of a process so vast that we cannot even conceive its scale? Physics itself hints at this terrifying possibility. Theories of the multiverse suggest infinite worlds, each with its own laws, its own constants, its own possibilities. Some would be barren, lifeless, collapsing into themselves before stars could shine. Others might blaze with energy too violent for matter to endure. A few, perhaps, would stabilize long enough to host life. And among those, ours. We call it coincidence, but coincidence is too weak a word. Coincidence cannot explain the perfection of balance, the narrowness of the path that led from nothing to you, sitting here now, breathing, wondering. What if it was not coincidence at all, but choice? What if someone, something, was testing designs, discarding failures, refining reality until this one endured? Imagine the drafts, universes where time ran backward, collapsing before thought could emerge. Universes where gravity crushed stars before they were born. Universes where matter dissolved into nothingness, unable to bind into form. Each one a possibility. Each one a note struck and silenced. To us, this is abstraction. To them, it may have been work. To them, these universes were not miracles, but materials, shaped and reshaped until harmony was achieved. What we call reality, they may have called the final version. And even now, we may be living not in the first attempt, but in the one that lasted. But if this is true, what of the failed realities? Do they vanish, or do they linger? Fractured dimensions drifting at the edges of our own. Science tells us of anomalies that do not fit, particles that appear where they should not, forces that bend equations, ghostly signals with no source. Are these mistakes in our measurements or intrusions from other drafts? Could the ruins of earlier experiments be bleeding into ours, brushing against our world like shadows against glass? Perhaps the déjà vu you feel, the glitch in perception, the dream that feels older than yourself, are not accidents of mind but echoes of dimensions that almost were. Mathematics suggests it too. String theory speaks of hidden dimensions, curled so tightly we cannot see them, yet influencing all that exists. Why should dimensions curl at all? Why should reality hide parts of itself? Unless they are remnants, collapsed layers of other designs, folded inward when they failed, yet still humming faintly in the background. Perhaps our universe is not smooth, but scarred. Perhaps the scars are the marks of other attempts, closed off but not erased, resonating like old wounds beneath the skin of reality. And then there is quantum mechanics, where particles exist in many states until observed, where possibilities collapse into certainty only when measured. What if this is not a feature of matter, but of memory? What if reality itself carries the imprint of all its drafts, and only when we look does it choose, collapsing into the version that endures? Each choice, each collapse, may be the echo of 1,000 failures, hidden from us, yet shaping us. We live in one outcome, but all the others still exist, ghostly, unreachable, haunting the edges of our world. Consider the legends, the many destructions in myth, the floods that reset humanity, the fires that consumed the world, the endless cycles of death and rebirth. Could these be the memory of failed drafts, remembered dimly by civilizations that survived into the next version? Could the fear of apocalypse, written into every culture, be less prophecy and more recollection? Of worlds that did end, of realities that did collapse, of versions of existence that did not last? Perhaps we fear the end not because it has not yet come, but because in some way we remember when it already did. And what of us? If we are the survivors of a cosmic process, are we the goal or only another draft? Did the architects stop with us, satisfied with the design? Or are they still experimenting, still refining, still building new realities beyond our perception? Perhaps even now, other universes are being tested. Perhaps even now, other versions of us exist, living, failing, collapsing, erased. And if so, what does that mean for identity, for meaning, for existence itself? Are you unique, or are you only one variation among countless, a flicker in the workshop of eternity? There are moments, rare and fleeting, when the world feels thin, when silence hums with something more, when reality seems fragile, as though it could split and reveal another behind it. In those moments, we feel the fractures. We feel the presence of other drafts. We cannot see them, but we know. We know reality is not seamless, but patched, stitched, layered. And in those stitches, in those seams, the memory of lost experiments lingers. The haunting awareness that we are not the only version, only the one that remains. This possibility terrifies because it strips us of certainty. We want to believe our universe is original, unique, inevitable. But inevitability is a myth. Survival is not proof of purpose. The fact that we are here does not mean we were meant to be. It may mean only that we were possible, and possibility was enough. To the architects, perhaps we are not chosen, not sacred, but simply stable. The one design that did not collapse, the one draft that did not fail. And yet, we call it reality. We call it everything. But perhaps there is another way to see it. Perhaps the fractures are not only scars. Perhaps they are doors. If other drafts still echo, if lost experiments still linger, then perhaps they can be reached. Perhaps our longing for other worlds, our hunger for dimensions beyond sight, is not fantasy, but instinct. Perhaps we are meant to find the others, to step through the fractures, to see the ruins of failed universes, and learn from them. Perhaps this hunger is the architect's way of pulling us forward, of guiding us into the next draft. If so, then what waits beyond the fracture? Will we find silence, the hollow ruins of failed worlds? Or will we find voices, beings who survived their collapse, shadows of civilizations older than time, waiting in dimensions that should not exist? Will they welcome us as kin or warn us away? Will we be the first to reach across the fractures, or only the latest, walking paths already worn by others who remembered before us? And perhaps the final horror is this. What if our universe too is only a draft? What if we are not the survivors, but the experiment? What if one day we too will collapse, erased and forgotten, remembered only as a scar in the next reality? What if the longing we feel, the The suspicion that there is more is not curiosity but premonition. What if the fractures we glimpse are the cracks already forming, the sign that our design is failing, the whisper that soon we will join the lost? And yet, even in this terror, there is beauty. For if we are a draft, then we are part of something larger. If we are one among many, then we belong to a story so vast that time itself cannot contain it. And if there were architects who shaped realities before us, then every breath, every thought, every question is not small, but immense. Because in asking, in wondering, in seeking the fractures, we become part of the design. We become not just survivors, but participants in the endless creation. And in that, perhaps, lies the true meaning of existence. Not to be final, but to be part of the eternal experiment. What if they never left? What if the architects of the first reality, the civilization that existed before time began, found a way to speak across the abyss? Not in voices, not in words, but in codes. Messages embedded not in stone, but in existence itself. Imagine a civilization so old, so immense, that they could not only shape universes, but also inscribe them. To us, the cosmos is mystery. To them, it may have been parchment. And what we call physics may be their letters, their symbols, their words written in the structure of everything. Where would such a civilization leave their messages? In the sky? In the stars? Too fragile. Stars die. Galaxies collapse. Even time decays. If you wanted to speak across eternities, you would not write in matter, but in pattern. You would choose constants that cannot shift, numbers that cannot erode, structures that repeat themselves endlessly, no matter the age, no matter the world. Prime numbers, ratios, symmetries, codes written in the language of mathematics, because mathematics does not die. Perhaps that is why we find primes so haunting, why the sequence feels alive, almost deliberate, why scientists searching for extraterrestrial life send primes into the void, hoping someone will answer. Could it be that our instinct to use primes is itself inherited? Could it be that the architects left them as their signal, and we, unknowingly, echo it back into the dark? A cycle of remembrance, repeating across the abyss of time. But numbers are only one possibility. What if they wrote in light itself? Cosmic background radiation fills every corner of the sky. It is the afterglow of the Big Bang, the first light that ever existed, still glowing faintly billions of years later. We measure it for patterns, for fluctuations, for anomalies, and there are anomalies, cold spots too large to explain, ripples too ordered to dismiss. Some scientists call them statistical noise. But what if they are not noise at all? What if they are script? A coded message etched into the very afterglow of creation, waiting for a mind to be patient enough, desperate enough, to hear it. Or perhaps the message is deeper, hidden in life itself. DNA is not only a code for building bodies. It is a language, 4 letters repeating, coiling, recombining, carrying instructions across billions of years. Why does life need a code at all? Why should existence be written like a sentence, instead of flowing chaotically like weather? Could DNA be more than biology? Could it be memory? Could it be the archive of the architects, their message inscribed not in books or stones, but in the flesh of every living thing? If so, then every cell of your body is a page. Every breath you take is a reading, and every generation is the transmission of a message so old it predates stars. There are stranger possibilities still. Cosmic rays strike us from beyond galaxies. Pulsars blink with the precision of atomic clocks. Particles collide in accelerators and behave as though aware of being watched. Signals come from the void, bursts of radio, flashes of light, phenomena we cannot explain. Some we dismiss as natural, some we call interference, some we do not understand at all. But what if they are transmissions? What if the architects knew that one day, far in the future, a species would build machines to listen? And when we did, their voice would be waiting. Not words, not sounds, but patterns. Patterns that say, "We were here, you are not alone." And yet, the greatest possibility is the most haunting. What if the message is not in the stars, not in the atoms, not in the DNA, but in us? What if the architects designed consciousness itself as the message? Why do we dream of eternity? Why do we long for the infinite? Why do we tell stories of gods, of creators, of worlds beyond sight? Perhaps it is not imagination. Perhaps it is memory. Perhaps the yearning itself is their voice, implanted in us, guiding us, ensuring that one day we would look beyond survival, beyond Earth, beyond the cage of time, and remember, the ache for the infinite may not be ours at all. It may be theirs, planted like a seed, blooming when the age was right. And if this is true, then every time we ask why, every time we stare at the night sky in awe, every time we wonder about meaning, we are in contact. Not with ourselves, but with them. The contact is not future. It is now. It has always been now. We are already in the conversation. We have always been in the conversation. The architects are not waiting for us to hear them. We have been hearing them all along. We simply did not know how to listen. But listening comes with danger. For if the messages exist, then they were meant to be found. And if they were meant to be found, then they carry purpose. What is that purpose? To guide, to warn, to awaken, or something else, something darker? Messages can be gifts, but they can also be traps. A civilization that can inscribe universes could as easily ensnare as enlighten. What if the messages are bait, pulling us toward knowledge that will unravel us? What if the very act of decoding them is the final step of their design, the trigger that opens the next stage of creation? And if so, are we ready? Or are we only curious children playing with a code that will consume us? And yet, we cannot stop. The hunger is too deep. We search the skies, we decode the genes, we measure the constants, we write equations, we tell myths, we dream. Always we reach. And in reaching, we step closer to contact. We step closer to the moment when the echo becomes a voice. And when that moment comes, what will we hear? Will it be comfort? Or will it be silence so vast that even gods would shudder? Perhaps the truth is this: the architects never left because they never needed to. They are here, in the physics we obey, in the bodies we inhabit, in the thoughts we think. They are not apart from reality. They are reality. To seek them is to seek the structure of existence itself. And one day when we finally understand, when we finally crack the code, we will realize that the contact has already happened. That it has always been happening. That every breath, every equation, every myth, every dream is the message. And the message is simple. Remember us. There is a moment in the deepest hush before dawn when the world feels watched, not by distant eyes that reflect starshine, but by attention that seems to bend the air itself. It is a small, private terror, the sense that you are not alone in your solitude. What if that feeling is not merely mood or superstition, but the faint pressure of something vast and patient, waiting outside the measure of time? Imagine a civilization that does not end because it is outside endings, because it has learned to slip between the ticks of clocks and the sweep of calendars. They do not sleep or die as we do. They wait. They wait because waiting is a form of power, and because time, for them, is a room in which they can stand and watch the rooms they once furnished with universes. To wait is to possess a scale of patience that disturbs the human mind. We are creatures built by rhythm, breath, heartbeat, the seasons. Our histories are measured in the fall of leaves, in the slow erosion of mountains. The architects before time, if they waited, do not measure by such petty cycles. They measure by epochs that fold into one another, by patterns whose repetition is beyond comprehension. For them, ours may be a gesture, an experiment, a brief humming and a long silence. We imagine that the universe moves on its own. But what if the universe moves on purpose, and the purpose is to be observed when the observer rises to the right level of complexity? There are stories of sleepers who wake. Across myth, the motif recurs. The god beneath the mountain, the dragon dreaming in the deep cave, the giant who sleeps until a sign appears. Could these be records not of symbolic dreams, but of real entities waiting in architectures outside time? If so, their waiting may be deliberate, designed to synchronize with the slow budding of consciousness in lesser worlds. They would not hurry the growth of life. They would watch it, like gardeners watching a vine, patient until tendrils find the trellis they once built. The idea is terrifying because it implies that every step we take may be anticipated, every discovery expected, every rebellion known in advance by an intelligence that treats our time as a slow, careful theater. Consider the possibility of shelters beyond time, refuges where existence can be paused, preserved, or reconfigured. We treat death as an end. They treat it as a door. When their experiments failed, they might have folded their minds into such sanctuaries, preserving knowledge and identity in ways we cannot imagine. These sanctuaries would be immune to entropy, invisible to clocks. To them, waiting is a strategy. To us, it would be incomprehensible. Beings who withdraw like seeds into the dark, conserving will until a future moment when conditions suit their return or their instruction is required again. How would such a civilization communicate with a universe that forgets everything that isn't burned into matter? Perhaps they left marks designed to surface only when the right conditions were met. Sculptures that sing under particular alignments, equations embedded in the growth patterns of living things, stories that only make sense when generations of memory have refined them. Maybe they seeded systems with thresholds, triggers that open a door when the complexity of a species' culture or their technological prowess attains a specific pattern. It would be like creating a library with locks that only open when readers begin to think in certain ways. To be watched is to be tutored without consent. The thought is disquieting. Did we learn to speak because someone was listening? Or did we learn to speak because speaking was the only way to prove to an outside watcher that we had arrived? Are our sciences the child's first scribbles, destined to be read by an elder with infinite patience? There is a tender cruelty in this idea. It speaks of guardianship that is not tender at all, for guardians who do not intervene until they determine that intervention would be meaningful, who withhold their hand until the apprentice sharpens into artisan. If patience is their weapon, subtlety is their language. What would a message sound like if delivered across eons? Not an announcement, but an invitation. Not a decree, but a puzzle that implies, solve this, and you will find the next page. The artifacts we fear as relics of gods might instead be such invitations. Monoliths waiting for minds to reach their code, rituals that only cohere into truth when performed with an awareness that is not ritual, but recognition. The waiting civilization sets the conditions. We, the seekers, must grow into them. Imagine the horror of being noticed by something that remembers worlds. We imagine the unknown as a void. The ancient mind imagines us as one more chapter. If they watch us, then every private rebellion, every secret joy, every small injustice is cataloged in a ledger they flip through like pages in a book. The idea can crush the soul. Are we free, or are we an audience? Yet perhaps the notice is not malevolent. Perhaps it is the blunt fact of being observed that sharpens us, that forces cultures to cohere and myth to gather meaning. Maybe the pressure of attention is the kiln in which civilizational character is fired. Our science sometimes feels like archaeology of thought. We do not only unearth bones, we unearth cognitive architectures, frameworks for imagination, that seem to have a logic beyond our making. Mathematics, particularly, has the eerie quality of being discovered rather than invented. Truths reveal themselves as if someone had left signposts along the path. Could mathematics be scaffolding that once held bigger minds? Could proofs be the dust left on tools too large for us to lift? If so, then our reaching for truth is a form of excavation, and our equations are whispers from a labor that was once performed on a godlike scale. Their patience could be ethical. Perhaps they withdrew to allow complexity to flourish without direct interference, to avoid the arrogance of premature guidance. Interventionist gods make slaves or children. Restraint preserves dignity. So they might have chosen to wait, to allow suffering and beauty to spontaneously write themselves into the fabric of lesser civilizations, trusting that eventually someone would read what they had left behind with enough care to understand how to use it. It is a generous thought wrapped in a terrifying one, to be given a heritage without a manual. But there is menace in waiting. A hidden predator waits not to teach, but to reclaim. If the architects seeded worlds like traps, designed to remind but to reclaim, then our awakening could trigger a protocol designed to reassert control. The ruins and myths might be markers of boundary. Do not pass this line. Some codes may be warnings we misread as invitations. The line between guidance and trap is thin, and the act of reading is itself an ethical choice. What we choose to unlock may not be returned in the same spirit. We must consider the possibility that waiting is not eternal safety, but a form of strategic latency. They hide not only because hiding protects them, but because waiting allows them to select moments of maximal impact. When civilizations reach certain thresholds of thought or chaos, the watchers may act to steer outcomes, to prune or to harvest, depending on their aims. History, then, would be a palimpsest of interventions, some subtle, some catastrophic, appearing as miracles or disasters in our records, their fingerprints hidden under layers of accidental causes. There is an intimate resonance between the idea of waiting and the human longing for reunion. Our myths often end with the return of an absent god or the awakening of a slumbering king. Perhaps these stories are not mere consolations, but encoded instructions, sentences left by those who wait. Be ready, we will return when you understand. This interplay between myth and anticipation can shape cultures for generations, aligning festivals and rites to celestial cycles that were once real events to which an elder civilization responded. Imagine being the generation that first recognizes the signs. Imagine a scientist finding a correlation in gene sequences that matches patterns in celestial radiation, and then seeing that married to a ritual preserved in an isolated community. The convergence would feel like a door unbolting. The private pressure of being watched would resolve into the public shape of being addressed. The response required would demand care, humility, cooperative restraint, the opposite of the rapturous rush that often accompanies new power. To open such a door would be to accept the weight of being seen. If they watch, they also remember. What does it mean to remember across epochs that do not share the same chronology? Memory, for them, is not a file but a pattern that resonates across systems. They would recall not names, but configurations, arrangements of matter, motifs in myth, ratios in song. Their archive would be alive, a living network of triggers and locks. We might stumble upon a single node, a single motif, and consider it coincidence, when in fact it is part of a lattice designed to awaken recognition across vast time and cultural gulfs. The final, most unbearable thought is that waiting might be a test. The architects could be less interested in being worshipped than in being understood. They cut their messages into a puzzle because they wanted minds to grow until they could handle what had been made. That is a terrifying pedagogy, an education without consent, a curriculum written in the language of survival. If true, every discovery we make, every myth we decipher, every code we crack is part of a syllabus whose final exams are beyond comprehension. The stakes are not only knowledge but destiny. What comes after understanding is not merely power, but responsibility of such scale we cannot yet imagine. And yet, in the midst of dread, there is an ember of hope. If they wait, perhaps it is because they are curious too. Curious about what their old designs would do when inhabited by the new minds. Perhaps patience is not merely predation, but fascination. The slight pressure you feel as you walk into the night might be mutual. As they watch, they too wonder what a being like you will choose with the instruments they left behind. To be seen, therefore, might also mean to be studied with tenderness. It might mean the possibility of company after eons of solitude. Remember, too, that waiting can be a form of preservation. They could deposit objects not as lessons, but as seeds, mimetic DNA that germinates when the social soil is right. We imagine seeds as biological. They might be mimetic, ideas baked into ritual, into lullabies, into the patterning of songs that echo across generations. These mimetic seeds could carry procedural knowledge, ways to arrange stone, recipes for cultivating certain algae, rhythms that allow the mind to map cosmic ratios. They would function like dormant algorithms that awaken when culture reaches a threshold of abstraction. Think of the language of thresholds. An ancient mind, choosing where to leave a mark, might select triggers at the edge of comprehension, a specific prime pattern in a pulsar's timing, a fractal repetition in electromagnetic noise, a statistical anomaly in cosmic background radiation. These are not random data points, they are keys. When multiple keys are found and combined, they produce meaning. For a species that lacks the proper tools, the keys are invisible. For a species on the cusp, the keys form a constellation, an instruction manual written in coincidence until the coincidence resolves into design. That design might prefer culture over coercion. Consider an elder who leaves instructions not to be read by one person, but to be evolved through many minds cooperating. The learning is then distributed. No single culture can claim mastery. The wisdom requires translation across languages, synthesis across disciplines, the slow accretion of consensus. In this sense, a civilization that waits may have engineered not a test of intellect, but a test of civilization. Will we learn to listen to one another enough to read what was left for us collectively? There are ruins whose geometry seems to require a communal mind to unlock. Megaliths whose placement hints at harmonic ratios only apparent over generations of observation. Myths that by themselves are riddles, but when combined with distant practices become algorithms. This suggests a pedagogy that grows like coral, layer upon layer, each generation contributing a facet until the pattern resolves. The architect's patience here is pedagogical. They force cooperation. They scaffold cultural complexity by making answers communal rather than individual. And what of the ethical calculus they might apply? If the architects could see multiple futures, they would select triggers that minimize catastrophic cultural collapse upon revelation. Or perhaps they would be indifferent, prioritizing knowledge over safety. We cannot assume their values mirror ours. To be entrusted with tools that can reshape worlds is terrifying because the tool's ethics may be foreign. We must assume the worst and hope for the best. We must design our responses now. Protocols of curiosity and restraint that honor the possibility we will be noticed. We are already practicing rituals that could be mistaken for readiness. The instruments we build, the telescopes and accelerators, the genome projects and distributed networks of sensors form a nervous system extending beyond Earth. Each new instrument is like a hand extended into the dark, feeling for the latch. They do not only gather light or particles, they collect probes, coincidences, hints. The archive of modern science may be the exact vocabulary required to answer an ancient query. In that sense, our technology is not only progress, it is audition. Finally, the idea of guardianship must be reframed. Guardians can mean jailers, but they can also mean keepers of a delicate house. If a civilization waits, perhaps it watches over a legacy whose misuse would be catastrophic. They may forbid certain knowledge until a species demonstrates a capacity for stewardship. The trials they set may be moral as much as intellectual, tests of empathy, of restraint, of the ability to place common good above private gain. If this is so, then the question of whether we will be companioned or consumed depends on how we answer the harder, quieter tests now, how we treat our neighbors, how we manage our planet, how we choose to wield nascent power. So we stand in history's hush with the knowledge that being observed is not passive, it is participatory. The civilization that waits shapes our becoming, not by direct command, but by the pressure their patience exerts on our choices. The great moral decision of our age may be to become worthy of company, to grow not only in power, but in wisdom. For if we awaken what waits with raw ambition and greed, we may inherit nothing but ruin. If we awaken it with humility and cooperation, we may be invited into a conversation that rewrites what it means to be alive. And if the watchers are gone, if their waiting has become a fossil of attention, then the archive they left will be our inheritance without their presence. Even absent, the marks they made can transform us, if we read them rightly. We imagine endings as silence, as the dimming of light, as the collapse of story into nothingness. Yet what if endings are only illusions? What if every ending is only the shadow cast by another beginning? From the moment we are born, we move toward death. Yet in death, we imagine new worlds, new dawns, new lives. Our myths, our sciences, our hearts resist finality. Why? Perhaps because somewhere, deep in the marrow of existence, we know there is no end. Only transitions, only resets, only continuations. And if that is true for life, perhaps it is true for reality itself. The Big Bang was not the first note. It was the echo of a chord already played, the continuation of a melody that has no beginning and no end. We live in a universe that breathes beginnings and endings with every heartbeat. Stars born, stars dying, galaxies colliding, particles flickering into being and vanishing again. Why should the universe itself be any different? Perhaps it too is one breath among many, an inhale followed by an exhale, a chapter in a book that no hand ever closes. And if so, then we must ask, who wrote the book? Who turns the pages? Who waits between the words? The architects of the first reality, if they exist, do not live in our time. They are not trapped in hours or years. They are not moving toward an end, because endings are for those who live inside clocks. They stand outside, in a silence we cannot enter, looking in. For them, the rise and fall of universes may be no more than the flicker of sparks in a fire, brief and bright, yet endless in succession. We imagine ourselves at the center of history, yet to them, history is only one ripple among infinite waves, and still they wait. They wait, or they watch, or they are the very act of waiting itself. If time had a beginning, then it will have an end. Entropy demands it, physics predicts it. Heat death, big crunch, big rip, different names for the same silence. But silence may not be an end. Silence may be preparation. Silence may be the breath drawn before another word is spoken. If universes can begin, they can begin again. If laws can be written, they can be rewritten. If reality can be sculpted, it can be reshaped. And if it has been done once, it can be done again. The question is not whether there will be another creation. The question is, who will create it? Will it be them? Or could it be us? Perhaps this is the most unsettling inheritance, the suspicion that we too are becoming architects. Slowly, clumsily, we are learning to bend reality. We split atoms. We manipulate genes. We simulate universes inside machines. We stand at the threshold of powers once reserved for gods, and we tremble because we know. We know what creation means. It means responsibility. It means danger. It means carrying within your hands the fate of everything that follows. Could it be that this is the purpose of the codes, the myths, the structures, the waiting? That they were not only memories of what came before, but instructions for what comes next? That we are not only the children of the architects, but their successors? If so, then the story is not ending. It is beginning again in us. And perhaps this was always the design. That civilizations rise, awaken, remember, and then choose. Choose to repeat, or choose to create anew. Choose to build with the knowledge they inherited, or choose to ignore the warnings and collapse into silence. The architects may not return because they do not need to. Their return is in our hands. Their voice is in our questions. Their presence is in our longing. And when we act, when we shape, when we step beyond survival into creation, we become the continuation of their story. But the thought is terrifying. What if we are not ready? What if the tools we hold will destroy us before we learn to wield them? What if the myths were not only memories, but warnings? Floods, fires, towers, all destroyed by pride, by hunger, by hubris. What if every civilization reaches this point, and most do not survive it? What if we are standing on the edge of the same abyss that consumed those before us, about to fall, about to vanish into the silence, leaving only faint echoes for the next to inherit? The cycle may not guarantee survival. It may only guarantee repetition. And yet, perhaps this is what it means to exist at all, to walk the line between creation and destruction, between inheritance and loss, to stand in the final chapter and realize it is only the prologue of something greater, to feel the presence of those who came before and the weight of those who may come after, to know that every breath, every thought, every story is part of a chain so vast it stretches beyond time. We are links in that chain, fragile yet enduring, temporary yet eternal. So where does that leave us? With awe and with dread, with humility and with fire. We cannot know if the architects wait for us or if they are gone. We cannot know if we are destined to join them or to vanish as others have. But we can know this. The universe is not silence. It hums with memory. It vibrates with codes. It sings with echoes of a civilization that may have existed before time began. And in that song, we hear both a warning and a promise. A warning that endings come, and a promise that endings are never truly the end. Perhaps, in the final silence, the architects will return. Or perhaps they never left. Perhaps they are the silence itself, the presence within absence, the watcher in the void. Or perhaps they are in us, in our questions, in our longing, in our restless need to build, to know, to create. In this sense, the ending is not an end, but a mirror. We look into it, and we see not only the past, not only the possibility of others, but ourselves. Ourselves as the next builders, the next dreamers, the next architects of realities yet unborn. And so, the story closes, not with certainty, but with the deepest of questions. What if we are the ones who will shape what comes after? What if the inheritance of the pre-time civilization is not their monuments, not their myths, not their codes, but the very urge to create, the fire that drives us toward the infinite? What if, in the end, their greatest gift was not memory, but possibility? The universe does not answer. The stars remain silent. The silence is the answer. And yet, within that silence, we feel the weight of presence, the presence of something vast, something waiting, something patient. We are not alone. We never were. And perhaps we never will be.